It is a great day in America again, and I feel we're going to have a great many successive great days in America for a very, very long time, especially after January 20th. Uh, he's not yet arrived. There's a static shot on the television monitor above my head of Reagan National Airport, where the president elect is going to be landing shortly for a meeting with the president of the United States, which I'm sure will be, a little tea and a little friendly discussion, but there's obviously a wariness going on with the current resident of the White House because he knows that the successor is going to be dismantling so much of what he's done. There was a big headline today. A fellow by the name of Rouhani, who is the president of Iran, says Donald Trump cannot tear apart the nuclear deal with the Iranians. Well, since President Obama decided to skirt the U.S. Senate when it came to treaty approval and put together his own deal, that means Donald Trump can reverse it his first day in office. Ha 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 ha. It reminds me a little bit of January 20th, 1980. You may remember you had the Iranians and they were blustering after they were holding Americans hostage, and they had mocked and laughed at Jimmy Carter for a year and a half, and along came Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan gave the impression he was simply going to blast Iran off the map. And Inauguration Day, all of those hostages got put on an airplane and sent home. Funny how that works. You know what? You show us yours, we'll show you ours. You got a couple, I got about 6,000, okay? You make my day. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Butterball over in North Korea is making some noise about all of this as well. I don't think his Chinese handlers are going to allow anything like that to happen. Despite all of their belly aching about Donald Trump, they still want to sell you gadgets. It's good for their economy. And I don't think they're going to let Pork Belly over there screw that deal up. I want to thank you for joining me today. I've got a whole stack of material about Trump. A liberal newspaper columnist at the New York Daily News today is comparing Staten Island, New York to Idaho. And not in a good way. Let me share with you. This guy wrote this column. I was reading it while I was drinking my morning coffee. I should point out I've been drinking my coffee from a percolator the last week. I bought it at an antique shop in Maryland some years ago, and Suzanne, my then-to-be wife, which she never ended up being, but she was angry with me saying, "What a waste of your dollars." But I bought it, and then when I got back to my house, she packed it away somewhere, and then I never used it. And so she eventually sent my things to me after I moved here, and it happened to be in a box. So I finally got around to unpacking the box the other day, and I unpacked the percolator, and I'll tell you what, much better coffee than a drip filter. So I was drinking my coffee this morning, looking over some headlines, and this writer at the New York Daily News is angry because he went out to interview voters in Staten Island, which it turns out is the only place in what are all of those boroughs of New York City, the only place that was Trump friendly. And the people there, they're not like the rest. They're not like the Manhattanites and the Brooklynites and some of those people there who aren't quite sure what they're when they look in the mirror in the morning what they are. No, the people on Staten Island get up every day and they know exactly who they are. They're good, hardworking people who really care about this country. And the columnist got upset because he said to this guy, "But aren't you, doesn't it bother you Donald Trump talks about women and makes locker room jokes?" And the guy said, "Nope." "Well, doesn't it bother you that Donald Trump may have paid very little in the way of income taxes?" "Nope." "Well, doesn't it bother you that Donald Trump has a lot of money?" "Nope." Well, excuse me, my friends, but I didn't care about a lot of that stuff either. It's it's about turning the country around, and that's how they felt. But the columnist is just mystified because he and all of his liberal friends, they couldn't vote for Donald Trump because, Hillary Clinton is such a paragon of virtue. She would never do anything criminal. I should note there is a story in the Daily Caller today that says the investigation into the Clinton Foundation continues with an entire office of FBI agents still looking into what happened there, which means that both Bill Hill and perhaps their daughter, maybe they could all give them a family plan and give them all the same cell when they actually get, it'll be like in Goodfellas. Remember where all the mobsters were all in one great big room and slicing garlic and cooking together and, drinking wine with their dinner every night? Maybe the Clintons will get some deal like that. Other than the fact they'll all have to wear orange, they'll be treated well, I'm sure, when they actually go off to prison. So this writer, after interviewing these people when he went out to Staten Island, says that they're a lot like the people, he calls it New York City's Idaho. Now, apparently, from my reading, he's likely never been to Idaho. And once again, someone from far away has a stereotype about what life would be like here. I always remind these liberal Easterners that the most popular politician in the state of Idaho is a guy by the name of Raul Labrador. So if there's this view they have back on the East Coast or even on the left coast that everyone here is riding around in bed sheets and white caps on, they're wrong. It's not at all like that here. In fact, people are very libertarian, and they'll let you go about living your way of life as long as you don't bother them, which should be, I would think, the American way. And yet the derangement, you've got people rioting in the streets. And the Department of Homeland Security sent out a warning late last week that there could be unrest after the election. They were likely, Jay Johnson, who's a flaming liberal running that department, likely was trying to point to Trump supporters, just like they used to claim that Tea Partiers would be out there and, bombing buildings. And none of that ever happened. It was always the American left. Tea Party rallies were always polite social affairs, and everyone cleaned up their own trash. I have attended some of the really large ones, and I know what I'm speaking of. I witnessed it. I witnessed what happened at the Glenn Beck rally in Washington 6 years ago when we cleaned up all of our own garbage. And then we walked down to the World War II Memorial where Al Sharpton's people had a little gathering of their own as a counter demonstration, and they dumped all of their empty pop cans all over that sacred ground. They threw their signs down there and left their signs all over the place. They just, strew their garbage all over a monument to 400,000 Americans who died fighting World War II and saving the planet from totalitarianism. And yet we were the ones the media said were dangerous. And this may well be why the election turned the direction it did. I have this from National Review today. I've got a whole stack of Trump stuff. I'm just going to give you a survey course in what people are saying around the country. A writer at National Review says he's done the math, and he's looked at Donald Trump's numbers, where Donald Trump actually won. And, he's going county by county and how these all added up in certain state victories. Donald Trump would have defeated Barack Obama in 2012. That dovetails nicely with what Rush Limbaugh was saying yesterday, that if both John McCain in 2008 and Mitt Romney in 2012 had more of a pitch like Trump had to people who actually pay the bills in this country, they would have won. They would have won. We wouldn't have had to suffer through Obamacare and grown men peeing next to your little girls in public restrooms. None of that stuff would be happening today. I've got this. Why did Trump win? Because Democrats think everyone who disagrees with them is an evil bigot. That's from a writer in North Dakota by the name of Rob Port. You think Islamic extremism is a problem? Well, then you're a racist. You're worried about illegal immigration? Then they call you a bigot. You believe that America is exceptional? Then they call you a dumb rube. And that was from his newspaper column, which I believe it appears in Minot and other small cities across North Dakota, but they're pretty bright people up in the Dakotas. How about this one? The New Republic, which is an old socialist magazine. It's a rag from Washington. A writer there named David Diane says that we've got to blame ourselves, if you're a liberal, for what happened in this country. And he said they keep claiming half the country is racist, and he says that's simply not true. And he said, God, this is my best, or I think my favorite part of this. He said, we read endless articles featuring reporters edging out to Red America armed with a notebook and a pretense of empathy. They came there to see what Trumpism was all about, why the fever seemed to be running so high among these people. And what did that produce? The daily filing of a basket of deplorables by the reporters. He says, I sometimes refer to it as point-and-laugh liberalism. In other words, these people, they go to church, they wave the flag, I like to burn it. And their men are married to women, and their women are interested in men. They're funny. And he says, people here in the center of the country just finally got sick of it. How about this? This comes from Robbie Sauvé, writing at Reason. Reason is a libertarian magazine. He says, Trump won because of a cultural issue that flies under the radar. That is, Americans don't like political correctness. In other words, you should be able to say what you feel without having fear of losing your job. I've been fired from 2 talk radio stations because liberals didn't like what I delivered every day on air. One of them was Hillary Clinton. Well, yeah, but there were a large number of people listening every day. I was successful. I was successful because people were listening, and they were listening, nodding their heads and saying dang straight. But because a handful of panty wastes don't like it, we're going to have a boycott, and you need to get that awful man off the air. The writer says, what is political correctness? Well, he says it's hard to define. But he says the segment of the electorate who flocked to Trump because he positioned himself as an enemy of it think it means this: smug, entitled, elitist, privileged leftists jumping down the throats of ordinary people who aren't up to date on the latest requirements of progressive society. Example, a lot of people think there are only two genders, boy and girl. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe they should change that view. Maybe it's insensitive to some. Maybe it even flies in the face of modern psychology, but people think it. Political correctness is the social force that holds them in contempt for that or punishes them outright. I don't believe I'm wrong because I don't want you coming in as a grown man and using the same toilet sitting down next to my little girl. I'm sorry. My duty was to protect my little girl. And you fools somehow think I'm just being mean because I won't let you do it? Then go pee in the gutter, for crying out loud, like a lot of your liberal friends do in the inner cities. Hell, in San Francisco, they go crapping in the streets now. They don't even bother to go to the toilets. How about this? Agence France Presse, the French, of course, known for the French salute during World War II. That was two hands held high over the head. That's AFP stands for their French press agency. They went to some Muslim countries, and they actually quoted some Muslims. One who said, I am very afraid. Will there be more wars? Will America attack Muslim countries again? Asked Indonesian activist Elijah Dieti as Muslims reeled Wednesday from Trump's shock U.S. presidential election victory. Where has Trump threatened to attack Muslim countries? I saw some gay fellow on some video this morning complaining that Donald Trump was going to bring an end to same-sex marriage. Trump didn't talk about those issues while he was campaigning. Actually, he may be the most gay-friendly Republican ever elected president of the United States. And then the same gay fellow says in his video, and he's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Yeah, well, what's that got to do with you? You're never going to be pregnant. Your partner's never going to be pregnant. And then he says, I want to apologize to all the Muslims Trump's insulted. Those Muslims would cut your head off, among other things, pal. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. 35 right now. I'll take some of your telephone calls coming up. Also, we have a guest along in a few minutes from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department. And we have a couple of guests in the next hour talking about some American heroes and some events that honor them. That's on the way this morning. So I don't understand how, liberals, especially the media types, were screaming, oh, Donald Trump says he may not accept the results of the election. And yet liberals go out into the streets, burn the American flag, and riot and pillage and loot. And that's okay. Oh, well, they're just expressing their constitutional rights to pee on the American flag. And we over here at the New York Times do that every day on our lunch hour. I have a caller joining us. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story on KLIX at 824. Go ahead.
Bill, the recent election was won by lunchbox Americans, the Clintons and Obamas, who have their lunches served to them on plates, coffee, and cups. On Friday, Trump's accountants figure out Social Security and income tax, then the money that the lunchbox workers will receive from Trump. The Clintons and the Obamas, who never owned a business, leave our borders open, destroying American jobs. The insane rioters are upset that Hillary, who would destroy their jobs, wasn't elected. The rioters are crazy.
Well, and again, they're upset that their free lunch isn't coming any longer. There's a video I saw online a few years ago where a man explains how he's on his back deck, how he built a bird feeder and he put it up and the birds would come and feed, and he liked looking at them while he was sitting on his deck. But he said eventually the birds started crapping all over the deck, and then they started dive bombing him, and he and his family couldn't even use the deck, so he got rid of the bird feeder. And then he said the birds were angry for a while with him for even doing that. It shows you that among a lot of these people, it's pretty much like they're the angry birds out there. No reference to any video games people may be playing. Got to make a quick note. I met some people the other day, and they'll be in studio with us sometime before Thanksgiving, I would imagine, from Waddell and Reed. They've been longtime sponsors at this radio station, but they're on board now with helping us keep the lights on, if you will, and keep my program on the air. They've been in business themselves, speaking about keeping the lights on a long time, for 8 decades, offering mutual funds, and they offer two, which many people don't have that option if you're looking to have someone invest your money for you. And they don't gamble with your money. It's a very conservative outfit. They know what they're doing over at Waddell and Reed, and they take it time to know you, because no two people when it comes to investments are exactly alike with what you're looking for, because everyone has different goals, especially when they retire. So they'll build that client, or build that plan rather, around the client's goals, and they'll help you manage your money. They take planning personally. I do want to point out you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you this morning. I was watching a video at my desk before I went on the air. This is one world leader who was speaking on the video. You may recognize his name and his Philadelphia accent, of all things, because he grew up in the Philadelphia area. But he had a grin ear to ear as he delivered this message.
President-elect Trump, my friend, congratulations on being elected President of the United States of America. You are a great friend of Israel. Over the years, you've expressed your support consistently, and I deeply appreciate it. I look forward to working with you to advance security, prosperity, and peace. Israel is grateful for the broad support it enjoys among the American people, and I'm confident that the two of us, working closely together, will bring the great alliance between our two countries to even greater heights. May God bless America. May God bless Israel. May God bless our enduring alliance.
Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, and of course, as I said earlier, formerly he grew up in the Philadelphia area. Right after his graduation from high school, he didn't go to the ceremony. Instead, he put on a uniform and he went and fought in the 1967 war against the Arabs. How many people leave high school and just go do something like that because they feel it's important in what they need to do? And that tells you a great deal about his character. And I am so pleased that we have someone in office who is not going to be an enemy of the only friend we really have in that part of the world. To sit here and say the Saudis are, that's baloney, as we know from the stories, the real story of 9/11. Coming up on 829, Bill Colley with you on Top Story and some of the other things that we're working on this morning. We're going to be joined in just a few minutes. Discussion with the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department on the way. Then, coming up after 9 o'clock news, Jerry Brown is going to join us from Jerome. Jerry's talking with us about the dedication of a monument this weekend. It'll follow Veterans Day. It'll take place actually on Saturday. And it's honoring his son Dan, who was killed at war, but also all of the other Idahoans who paid that last full measure of devotion for the USA. That's on the way, and we'll also be talking in the next hour about the upcoming Marine Corps Ball, which, short notice, that's going to be tonight at the Turf Club, and we'll tell you how you can get a ticket. And even if you weren't in the Marine Corps, take like a guy like Don Hall, who's, of course, a proud Marine, but if you don't necessarily have to be a former Marine yourself. We don't say ex-Marines because there's never an ex-Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine, they tell me. But tonight, there's going to be a dinner at the Turf Club, and it's in honor of the founding of the Marine Corps, which is celebrating a birthday. So those things are on the way. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News. There we go. Tickle in the throat again. Got to stop eating all of that junk food for breakfast. And actually, I'll tell you a little bit more later about how cutting out junk food and some other efforts in my life have started to slim down my waistline. News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It's 35. Thank you for joining us this morning, too. I wanted to mention quickly, coming up after 9 o'clock news, Jerry Brown will be joining us, talking about the dedication of a monument Saturday to Idaho's war dead. That includes his son, Dan. That's taking place in Jerome. Also wanted to thank Ken Bache for coming in. Ken is a school resource officer as well, so in the future we may be talking with him about some issues related to what's going on in our schools. And the one thing I can say about Idaho is you can send your kid to school here, though, and generally you don't have any fear. Some parts of the country, sending your kids off to school, wow, But, that critic I mentioned earlier from New York City at the Daily News who compared voters in Staten Island who voted for Trump to people in Idaho as if we're all walking around our knuckles dragging on the ground. Once more, would you rather send your kids to schools in Idaho or New York City? See, I think that's a pretty I think most people around the country would choose Idaho. Even a lot of city people would nod their head and do that. Also saw last night there are a lot of stories floating around about all of those celebrities who claim they're going to leave the country because they're so upset with Donald Trump's victory. Many of them said they were going to go to Canada, but Canada doesn't want them, as it turns out. And you may have a liberal prime minister in Canada, but a lot of Canada is actually very conservative, especially the western provinces. So some fellow living on the eastern side of BC, because if you're on the western side, you might be in Vancouver, and then you have the danger of finding a lot of liberals there. But if you're on the eastern side of BC, you're likely living in a very conservative part of Canada. And he took a picture of his ranch, which actually looks a lot like Idaho and Montana and parts of Wyoming. But he took a picture of his ranch and said if liberals wanted to come, they were welcome, but they were going to have to work at his spread. He has had no takers. 8:45. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. I know it's as if liberals don't have any interest in hard work. Who'd have thunk it? It's 38. Got plenty of time left this morning. I do want to mention we had a great opportunity yesterday to sit down and talk about post-election stress and anxiety with Dr. Jonathan Tripp. We didn't get into all of these colleges, though, that are, oh my goodness, some of the things that they're doing at colleges where they're allowing children to play with, yes, children, some of them 22 years old, are allowed to get out the coloring books and the crayons, and what they're doing is they're coloring to reduce their stress. One fellow at one college canceled all of his classes yesterday because he said students were too upset to come to class. I know we all think that in our grown-up lives that, gee, I was upset with the election, so I can't bring myself to go to work and make a living. What would happen if all of America stayed home? These are the people we are supposedly raising to run the country someday. What would happen if North Korea actually carried through on one of its threats? What would they react to? How would they react if they were running the country? Would they go into the timeout room and hide themselves and pull out, their Donald Duck coloring book and start going at it while the world was burning around them? That's the thing about radiation. It will. A box of Crayola won't stand up to it. Well, speaking of Dr. Tripp or one of his associates will be back in studio with us next Wednesday between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, right here on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And you can, of course, always have an opportunity to talk to one of the medical professionals, get some advice, get steered in the right direction. Remember, the office is located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, across from the main post office. And Dr. Tripp and his staff are still looking for new patients, and they can often see you on the very same day if you have a medical issue when you get out of bed and you need someone to talk to you very quickly. They'll help you out. And remember, their motto at the office, life's too short not to feel good. We've been talking a lot about the election just because I think that there's been no story like it in the history of this country. And after watching some of the liberals riot last night and burn American flags and demand that somebody give them some more free stuff, I got thinking about a conversation we had election night on this program with, of all people, Jim Risch, one of our U.S. senators. And we were talking with him about where we go from here following the election. How do you put the country back together? How do we patch up our differences? And this was Senator Risch's response.
Well, that's a really good question. And probably what we ought to do is do another one of these interviews when we can spend a fair amount of time on that question, because the problem we have is the country is polarized. And everybody says, oh, Congress is polarized. Well, of course it is. It's polarized because the people who we represent are polarized. And we have a real tug of war going on as to whether America is going to be what the Founding Fathers gave us, and that is a free enterprise system where we have a free market system and we have those kind of liberties, or are we going to be a European-style country where we just put all the money in the pot and people don't have to work too hard? You just you're able to draw from the pot. They take care of you from the time you're born till the time you die. Literally, they pay for your birth, your funeral, and your retirement and everything in between. And the question is that what where America's going to go. And we're about evenly divided. And America, if we're going to get rid of a lot of this contentiousness that's going on, as a country, we need to decide which direction we're going to go. Are we going to go the way these other countries have gone, or are we going to be what the Founding Fathers gave us?
And remember, he has a 98% rating from the American Conservative Union, so he's not recommending European-style socialism. In fact, we had not yet gotten to the end of election night, so we were speculating on air while we were talking with Senator Risch about the outcome and whether or not Republicans would maintain the lead in the Senate, which they did, which they're still in the majority. And the conversation, though, was, well, would anything change with the goals, the priorities of Republicans in the Senate, even if they were in the minority? And he explained that the agenda, the goals of the Republicans are unchanged, whether they be just one out of 100 senators or whether they be 100 Republican senators.
One of the things that concerns all of us, some to a greater degree and others to a lesser degree, and that is the issue that is a huge threat to America. It's a national security threat and everything else, and that is the spending and the debt. America spends $11 billion a day, and that would be okay if they had $11 billion a day, but they don't. So they borrow $1.25 billion every single day. Now, let me say that again. The United States borrows $1.25 billion every single day. When I was a governor of this great state, we ran the state of Idaho on $3.5 billion for a year. So I know what you can buy with $3.5 billion. But when you're borrowing 365 days of the year, $1.25 billion, it's staggering. It's taken the national debt from $10 trillion to $20 trillion. Well, I've been in the Senate, and I say that, and it goes over the top of everybody's head because nobody knows what $1 trillion is. You can't imagine $1 trillion. That amount of money, wealth, whatever you want to call it, assets, it's like your mind trying to conceive the number of stars in the sky. You can't do it. And it has consequences. It's got horrific consequences because every day the amount of money that's spent by the United States, a larger percentage of it goes to pay the interest on the national debt, and that's eating away at what we're able to do. And there are some things, obviously, we need to do, like defend the country and things like that, that are going to suffer because we're spending ourselves on a credit card that we're not going to be able to make payments on.
I was thinking about those comments you just heard from Senator Risch this morning as I was watching some of the pictures of the rioting taking place, the liberals who were burning flags and smashing windows and demanding that Donald Trump be ousted. I told you the other day, some of them are already threatening his life. And as I was watching these people, because they're upset that they won't continue to be able to get a free lunch. That's what this is really all about. Risch and Republicans in the Senate, and I would assume Republicans in the House are no different, all understand that if you have a debt, which will officially become in early February, the new president will have to deal with this, $20 trillion. And as he said, it's only imagine the stars in the skies. The number is so big. And if you don't get a handle on it in 10 years, as he points out, you won't even be able to pay for national defense. Well, okay, if you can't give people their EBT cards because there's no money, when the cupboard is empty, which is what it's going to be, are they still going to be in the streets demanding? Who are they going to take it from? They're going to take it from you. And they already do it because government essentially is playing the middleman and the broker taking money from you and turning around and providing it for all of these programs. But you've got at least some people warning it's got to come to an end. And yet, why is it so many people out there, even some Republicans, but why is it so many people out there don't seem to be able to understand that? They just, we'll just tax the rich more. Well, Peter Morici, the great economist from, I believe he's at the University of Maryland, has a column. You'll recognize him. I've mentioned this on the air before. He does the copier commercials on TV, and he has the bow tie. Peter Morici was writing in his column at the Washington Times today about the seriousness of this situation. And he was pointing out that if you really want growth to turn the economy around, you need to allow the people who build the factories to hold on to some of that money so they can invest it. Now, my dad told me a story many, many years ago when I asked him, I said, Dad, why can't food be free? I was a little boy at the time. And when you've got an elementary understanding of the world, and I guess a lot of liberals never outgrew that, you think that it should be. And then he explained, well, the guy who grows that food needs a paycheck. And the guy who actually processes that food, puts it in a can, needs a paycheck. The guy who delivers that food needs a paycheck. The people who sell you the food at the grocery store, they need a paycheck. So that was a pretty simple one for me to understand. It was a concept that I didn't find difficult, and I know American liberals struggle with these things. But then I was talking with him about taxation and why some people had more money than others and why we didn't take more of their money away from them so it could be equally spread around. And he looked at me and he said, I'll tell you something. If today we took everybody's money and put it into one big pot and divided it up equally, he said, I'll tell you right now, 6 months from now, the people who have all the money today will have it all again, simply because they know how to make it. And then they invest it. And I was talking with a friend yesterday about the government has been taking your money and giving it to these fly-by-night schemes for alternative energy. And then the big Democrat Party donors who get that money, they go, if they create any jobs at all, they create them overseas and claim it's cheaper to manufacture solar panels in China than here, with your tax dollars, I should point out. And this scam continues to go on, and yet, despite the government trying to take your money and fleece you in order to reward the big party donors, the Democrat Party donors, your big oil companies have also been putting money into research into alternative energies without anyone from the government telling them to do it. Their own money. And why are they doing that? Because they're in the energy business. And being in the energy business, they're looking at alternative means to provide energy because, well, 100 years from now, these companies still plan to be in business. They strategically look at the future and they make plans and they say, what are we going to need? And it's profitable, too, if you find the right alternative energy, and then you can make more money and you can employ more people and you can make your shareholders happy. None of this is out of the realm of understanding for anyone, is it? I mean, we all get how it works. And yet, you still have people like, greedy corporations being mean to me, and I haven't done anything, and I've been sitting around playing video games all day, but I need a sandwich, and I want them to pay for it. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I got up this morning, walked outside, and once again noticed it was a little chilly out. Still kind of chilly right now at 37, on our way into the mid-60s. If you haven't yet tried out the furnace at home, and maybe you haven't needed it, a lot of people haven't needed to turn it on yet, but you ought to do what I did. I did a quick test last weekend. I turned it on, let it run for a while just to make sure after a couple of hours that it was functioning properly. If it's not, you need to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. And then they can come out and they can ensure that the repairs are done to get that thing operating efficiently, and they'll get the job done right the first time. Problem-free cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. The telephone number is 678-0459. That's 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. We're going to be talking about an event that will honor our Idaho heroes coming up in just a few minutes, right here on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. But first, we'll get an update from Fox News.